Hey guys, welcome to the Kim Iversen Show. Happy New Year. Thank you guys so much for being here. We are officially in 2025. I cannot believe it. Time flies, but here we are. So hopefully you have some great things to look forward to in 2025. I'm hoping that this year is going to be a good year. We'll see what the year has in store for us, won't we? All right, we do have in store for you tonight a really great show. We're going to be taking a look at the two terrorist attacks that happened yesterday. We're going to look at the inconsistencies and how they're related to Fort Bragg, the hub of U.S. PSYOPs. Also, many, including Elon Musk, are calling for the release of Tommy Robinson, who is sitting in Belmarsh prison for a speech crime. Interestingly, this comes on the heels of Elon demonetizing a slew of accounts on his free speech platform, supposed free speech platform X. Tommy is fiercely anti-Islam, pro-Israel, pro-Indian immigration, and the demonetized accounts are anti-Israel. Also, Thomas Massie has pointed out the new House rules package that is set to be voted on right after the House votes on Speaker of the House, and it has a sneaky provision baked into it to protect Netanyahu. And lastly, with health insurance companies and their shoddy practice of denying claims in the spotlight, we have some info on what you can do if you get denied that could help you potentially reverse your claim. It's really important information, so we're going to share that with you tonight. That is all coming up here on the show. But first, if you're watching on YouTube, please know we are going to be turning this stream off after the first segment. So the second segment of the show is not safe for YouTube. I'll tell you that right now. We would be hindered, demonetized. Who knows what would happen? A strike would maybe happen to us if we do the second segment on YouTube. So if you're watching on YouTube, head over to the free speech platform. All you have to do is just go to KimIversonShow.com, and that'll route you to where you need to be to see the entire show. And the show airs every Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. So again, if you want to watch the full show, head to KimIversonShow.com. I think that link is also down below for you guys. All right, before we get started with tonight's show, the countdown is on before the new administration exposes the entire pandemic. Most know that a large sum of people's health was negatively impacted by global coercion, whether severe side effects or experiencing long COVID. Check out this natural solution formulated by Dr. Peter McCullough in collaboration with the wellness company. And they just leveled up their original detox formula for $30 less. So that's always a great deal. Introducing the 3-in-1 Ultimate Spike Detox, conveniently consolidated into one capsule with 4 times more nattokinase, 500 milligrams of bromelain, and 500 milligrams of turmeric root extract. Nattokinase is an enzyme researched for its anti-clotting effects. It may work to break down spike proteins. Combined with bromelain and curcumin, it provides a potent blend of detoxification and cellular support. Crafted with 100% natural ingredients, Ultimate Spike Detox is backed by research offering effective support for your cells, natural repair and recovery. So experience the only formula approved and used by Dr. Peter McCullough, a top freedom-fighting doctor who risked it all. Head to twc.health/Kim. Use code Kim to get 15% off, plus get free shipping. Again, that's code Kim to get 15% off. Head to twc.com/Kim and get back to that pre-COVID feeling. All right, let's take a look at these two terrorist attacks that happened yesterday, these two terrible terrorist attacks. We're going to look at some of the details of these attacks and focus on the inconsistencies, the connections to Fort Bragg, the notorious hub for U.S. PSYOPs. And then we're going to ask the big question that everybody should be asking, which is, who benefits the most from these attacks? So let's start off with the no-law French Quarter attack. This is the New Orleans French Quarter attack that happened really in the middle of I guess it was technically January 1st. It was kind of New Year's Eve. It was at 3:15 in the morning. So this deadly terrorist attack happened when, and I think right now we're at 14 fatalities, dozens more injured. The incident happened on Bourbon Street in the French Quarter at approximately 3:15. A rented white Ford F-150 Lightning truck driven by 42-year-old Shamsuddin Jabbar, a U.S. Army veteran from Texas, plowed into crowds of New Year's revelers on Bourbon Street. Jabber maneuvered around a police blockade, drove onto the sidewalk. He struck numerous pedestrians over a 3-block stretch. After crashing the vehicle, he exited and opened fire on the crowd and at responding police officers with an assault rifle and a handgun. I know a lot of you don't like the term assault rifles because, I mean, every weapon could be used for assault or not assaulting, right? But basically, it was an AR-style rifle and a handgun. I'm just giving you guys all of the details at the moment, and then we're going to kind of get into some of the deeper stuff on this. Law enforcement then returned fire at him. They killed him in the ensuing shootout. The attack resulted in at least 14 fatalities, with dozens more injured. Among some of the confirmed victims, I do want to give you some of them. You have to assume that on a New Year's Eve party like this at 3:15 in the morning, these are going to be younger people. Tiger Beck was 28 years old, a former All-Ivy Princeton football player. Nikra Cheyenne Dado was an aspiring nurse. We don't have her age, but probably young. Reggie Hunter, 37, a store manager, father of 2. I mean, these were just some of the people that were killed. Absolutely terrible, terrible way to end your life and for these families to start their New Year's. As of January 2nd, 16 people remain hospitalized. The FBI is leading the investigation and has classified the incident as an act of terrorism because they say that an ISIS flag was recovered from Jabber's truck. Jabber posted videos online prior to the attack expressing support for ISIS and his intention to carry out the attack. Also, 2 functional improvised explosive devices were found in coolers on Bourbon Street and rendered safe by authorities. Also, additional explosive devices were discovered in the French Quarter. Now, there have been some mixed reports on whether or not multiple individuals have been involved or are involved in this attack. At first, they said yes, there was some surveillance footage that showed 2 men and a woman planting explosive devices. But then they did more investigation and they came out and said, no, actually he acted alone. But now they're actually saying, actually, there might be some other people involved. I think we actually have the video clip of them saying there might be other people involved. Let's watch that.
A source within the New Orleans Police Department says officials have identified the suspect who drove the truck. The suspect identified as Samshud Din Jabbar. Now, Jabbar was carrying a Glock pistol and a .308 rifle that had been reportedly stolen in New Jersey. The .308 rifle was equipped with an optics and/or suppressor. There are at least 4 or 5 other suspects involved. That's a big detail right there, identifying again the suspect as a Samshud Din Jabbar, but 4 or more individuals also involved. This is becoming a different story, Paul.
Okay, that's interesting that at first they said there might be other people, but then they were like, no, but now there maybe are. And we'll get into the motive of that. Or maybe there were more people involved. Probably, actually. But okay, let's talk about now these ISIS videos that they claim he put out there. So apparently he proclaimed his support for ISIS. He claimed that he had joined ISIS before the summer of 2024. He explained that his original plan was to harm his friends and family, but then he changed his mind and he was like, oh, that wouldn't actually be big enough of a message. People would just think that I was a crazed person who got angry over a divorce and wanted to go after my family, which there's a lot of people who do that. So instead, he decided he wanted to go after other people so that people would understand that this was a holy war between believers and disbelievers. And then he also provided his last will and testament. So in the first video, he revealed that he had initially planned to harm his family, but he said, quote, it was a war, right, I just said this, a war between believers and disbelievers. He not only expressed support for ISIS, but he also claimed to have joined the group before the summer of 2024, so just a few months ago, really, so 6 months ago or so. And this claim, along with the ISIS flag that they found on his truck, have led authorities to investigate and believe that he is affiliated with ISIS and that this was an ISIS attack. Moreover, on these videos is that, where did I have this in my notes? These videos were just, the videos were posted. There were 5 total videos that were posted on Facebook. But here's the thing. It's not like he was posting these videos weeks or months in advance. He posted them mere hours and minutes in advance of the attack. So the 5 videos on Facebook happened at 1:29 a.m., between 1:29 a.m. and 3:02 a.m., and then the attack happened at 3:15 a.m. So this wasn't like a history of posting videos and proclaiming his support for ISIS and proclaiming that he had joined ISIS. This was just in the mere hours right before the attack. That to me is a little strange. His family reportedly were interviewed. They said that he had joined Islam, that he had converted, and that he had some erratic behavior ever since he had converted to Islam. Only in these last few months. So he converts to Islam, has erratic behavior, then he posts these videos online, suddenly showing support for ISIS, and then does this attack. Let's see here. Now let's talk about, and then there's this flag, and I want you to notice that this flag, by the way, is upside down. So this is the ISIS flag, but it is upside down. And we'll get to that. We'll talk about that inconsistency in a little bit. But let me get on to one of the questions a lot of people have, which is what happened to the road barriers to protect pedestrians from the vehicles? So places like New Orleans, you see this all over, like Austin, Texas, there are road barriers that are put up in order to prevent vehicles from driving on. It's not just to prevent pedestrians from attacks. It's also just to prevent lost vehicles from taking a wrong turn and getting onto a road that is heavily populated by pedestrians. But it's also to protect from drunk drivers who don't realize where they're going and suddenly they're running into a crowd of people. That's what these road barriers are for. And there's a variety of different types of road barriers out there. There are some that are just posts that a car would not be able to drive through. There are some that are actual metal barriers on hydraulics that come up out of the ground, and then they flatten for times when traffic can be there, and then they stick back up when traffic cannot be there. And a lot of people are wondering what the hell happened to these barriers. They should have been there protecting all of these people. And they usually are. But interestingly, they weren't during New Year's Eve. And the reasoning was apparently the Bourbon Street Bollard Assessment and Replacement Project began just in November, so just a month earlier, and was scheduled to be completed in February. So they were under repair, and they just so happened to be under repair from November until February. At the time of the attack, 11 out of 16 of the locations had been replaced. So most of them had actually been completed in that month of November and December. They had done most of them, but there were just a few, 4 of them, that had not been replaced. The original bollard system was installed in December of 2017. It had become unreliable. So the black removable bollards previously installed proved unreliable, were non-operational. Mardi Gras had caused blockages in the old bollards, leading to their failure. So in the absence of functioning bollards, the city had implemented alternative security measures, a white gate barrier. So they were using these white gate barriers. It's like, you could easily drive over that, but they're for cars so that they know down that part of the road. So they're really as strong as like the bollards or the metal gates on hydraulics that come up that would actually, the car would come to. Of course, the white barrier could actually just be plowed down. But nonetheless, they said that the white gate barriers were being used in areas where the bollard removed, managed by the New Orleans Police Department. A cruiser was parked at the intersection to block vehicles' access to Bourbon Street. So they just had a police cruiser sitting there. But despite these measures, the attacker was able to circumvent the security setup. The suspect drove around the police, blocking the road and onto the sidewalk. That's all he had to get a car. So the police chief said, we indeed did have a plan, but the terrorists defeated it, right? You just had one police car sitting there to block cars ramming in when normally you would have had a bollard system there. Okay, so I just want to, we'll get to all consistencies. Hold on, let's just get to some more of the here. So the truck itself was rented on an app called Turo. People are not familiar with Turo. I've used it a couple of times. What it is, and I've used it to test drive cars. That's the times that I've used it. I've been interested in buying a car. I would go on Turo, I'd rent it, test drive it out. Turo is individuals. It's sort of the Airbnb of cars. So it's an individual with a car that doesn't really drive it much, or maybe it's a second car, they have many cars, or maybe it's somebody who's getting into the business of renting out cars. They can get on this app and list their private vehicle for rent. And then people will come, rent the car, drive it around, and return it back to the owner. It's Airbnb for it's not that well known. Interestingly, both attempts rented their cars on Turo. This truck was rented. Turo picked it up at from the truck from the individual in Houston on December 30th and moved to New Orleans on December 31st. So it's not like he truck in New Orleans. He had it in Houston. He drove it from Houston to New Orleans. So he wasn't from New Orleans. And so how would he know that the bollard system was not effective? Also, there was some questions about the Airbnb that Jabber was staying in New Orleans. One of the reports was that the burnt down. The FBI confirmed to News Nation that they were investigating an Airbnb in the St. Roch neighborhood, located about a mile and a half from the attack on Bourbon Street. Airbnb was described as being ablaze or on fire earlier in the morning, but the extent of the fire or damage is not specified. So when they went to the house, it was ablaze. We don't know if it burned down, if it was just part of the house, triggered it. Was it an explosive device in the house that went off that shouldn't have? The attacker set the house on fire in order to tracks these potential other people who were involved in the attack. Did they burn or try to light it or try to burn it down in order to cover the track? Questions there. But officiously, the Airbnb was ablaze when they showed up. Federal law enforcement, they were present at the Airbnb location for several hours and were evacuated from the area at around 8 a.m. They were not allowed to return for at least 8 hours. And investigators are trying to determine if this location was used by the suspect to create or store some of the improvised explosive devices mentioned in the earlier report. So we still don't have a lot of information about the ablaze Airbnb, but that's part of this. Okay. Now let's look at his career background. He was a former Army vet. He served in the military for about a decade, working as both a human resources and an IT specialist. He was enlisted in the Army from March 2007 to 2015, including a deployment of Afghanistan from February 2009 to June 2010. He then transferred to the U.S. Army Reserve until July of 2020, leaving with the rank of staff. He then went on to work at Ernst & Young, one of the nation's largest professional services firms. He then went on to work for Deloitte. Mostly, he was employed by them, another major professional services firm. As of 2022, he was earning close to $125,000 annually at Deloitte, which is a really good amount of money if you're living in Houston, Texas. He also attempted to start his own real estate business called Blue Meadow Properties, though court records indicate it was failing to produce revenue and was losing money. So they're claiming, the claim is, let's get a picture of this guy up. I don't think we've even seen a picture of him yet. Have we shown a picture of him? This is the attacker. So people are pointing at this, obviously a guy with a name like Jabbar, Jabber, Shamsuddin Jabber. I'm not sure if I'm even pronouncing that right. They're saying, where is he from? This guy is an immigrant. This guy shouldn't be here. He was actually born in Texas. I don't know what his family heritage is, where they're originally from. But the guy was American, and he served in the U.S. military and then apparently got radicalized by. Now, they're saying that he was radicalized ISIS at 42 years old, despite having a career and a high income. They said that, that he was facing financial difficulties because of a divorce. He was going through a second divorce. This caused financial difficulties. That combined with, some personal issues with his wife and kids and some apparent radicalization. This is what contributed to his actions leading up to the attack in New Orleans. Most people who join ISIS are in their 20s, and We don't really see guys like Jabber who have stable careers and are older. We don't, and they're well integrated into society. We don't really see this type of person joining ISIS. This is not the prototypical. Doesn't mean it couldn't happen. It's just not typical. This is not the typical profile. Okay, let's talk now Bragg and association with Fort Bragg, and then we'll get into more of Fort Bragg. Based on the available information, now he served 10 years in the military. Shamsuddin Jabbar was stationed at Fort Bragg, known as Fort Liberty, in North Carolina in 2015. So this can be inferred from the following details. He received an honorable discharge from the Army after being caught driving intoxicated in 2015. He served in the U.S. Army for about a decade, from March 2007 to 2015, but that's why he left. He got a DWI. After his active, he transferred to the U.S. Army Reserve until July of 2020. We don't know his exact dates at Fort Bragg, but it's clear that he was stationed there at least in 2015. Maybe longer than that, at least in 2015. That's where he was towards the end of his active duty service in the Army. So that's what we know. We do know he was there, and that's going to be important for later on when we get into some of the details here. Some people are pointing to his political donations. The Federal Election Commission showed that Jabber made 2 small donations through Act Blue, a Democratic fundraising platform. One donation in 2015 while he was a U.S. soldier in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Another donation in 2020 when he was living in Fresno, Texas. And these donations were really small, $20 over the course of 6 years. So probably a Democrat. People are pointing that and saying, see, we got this problem with all of these radical Islamist Democrats. They're here in the country and they're ruining the country. They're waging war on us. Now let's look at some of the inconsistencies attack before we move on to the next, and then kind of look at all of the bigger inconsistencies. So this guy joined ISIS, but he flew the ISIS flag upside down. So you're a member of ISIS and you joined ISIS over 6 months ago. Don't you think one of the first things you would know to do is pledge allegiance to your ISIS flag? And you would know which direction that flag should go in. But it was in this photograph, that is the ISIS flag upside down on the pole. Furthermore, all of the videos of him driving the car, the video of the car at the end, the flag was wrapped up. It doesn't even look like really flying. So, I mean, if you're going to be doing an ISIS attack, wouldn't you have the flag flying? In fact, some of the videos or the images, it looks like a jacket hanging on the pole, like a black kind of vest or jacket on the pole. But these pictures, and then the authorities were told it's an ISIS flag. And then we saw these images of the ISIS flag on the ground, fully out on the pole, but it's upside down. So did he put the flag on the pole upside down? Why would he do that if he was a member of ISIS and probably knew exactly what that flag should look like? Was the flag not really on that pole and they staged it and put it on the pole? And whoever did that didn't realize that they put it on upside down, their little staging tactics. Or was he not, he do it and he put it on upside down because he wasn't really a member of ISIS and he really didn't know which way that flag should go, but that was part of the plan to scare people, to keep people at war, to get people to go to war in the Middle East, to get them to want to keep fighting in Syria rather than out and saying, we got to fight in Syria. ISIS is in Syria. We got to keep fighting. We can't be pulling we got to help out Israel because they're fighting, or whatever the motivation may be. We've seen this time and time again now with the pro-Palestine protests. We'll see somebody come out and wearing a keffiyeh, and they'll do a salute, and it turns out that was actually a Jewish person that was in disguise, and it was all meant to create hysteria and people to take something seriously that they want to kind of stir up controversy, get people to think that something is happening that isn't really happening. Is it possible that he wasn't really a member of ISIS at all, but that he was just trying to get people to think that ISIS was here? Was it the officials that were there at the attack that make it an ISIS attack, kind of make it look like the Germany Christmas market attacks? I mean, Strange though. The flag was upside down. That's just strange, and that doesn't really up. So this guy happened to only make videos in the wars before the attack. Never made any other proclamations towards ISIS prior. Doesn't that seem strange to anybody? Also, he was from Houston, but he just so happened to know that the road barriers in New Orleans were under construction. They were under. Do you know what's going on and what's under repair in other cities? Would you know if you're planning an attack in a city away? Would you know exactly which roads you should drive down and which ones are not going to be manned by white gate barriers, let alone the bollard system, and instead just have a cop sitting there? Would you know? Okay, what is happening? Okay, sorry about that, guys. We are going to, I had kind of a choppy connection there, so I had to reset and restart, but I'm back here. And we're going to start off, I'm just going to rewind a little bit. We're going to start with the inconsistencies on the New Orleans attack. So let's look at the inconsistencies. So apparently this guy joined ISIS, but he flew the ISIS flag upside down. There is a image of the flag on the pole, and that is upside down. So doesn't that seem a little bit strange to you that a guy that has pledged allegiance to ISIS, don't you think he would know what the ISIS flag looks like and he would put it correctly on the pole? Or is there something else that was going on here? Like perhaps the authorities who originally told us that there was an ISIS flag that was attached to this truck, and then the photographs came out and a lot of us saw what looked like a puffy jacket wrapped on a pole. That's what it looked like. It didn't look like a flag at all. It looked like a puffy jacket, to be honest. And then they released this photograph and they're like, see, here's the ISIS flag. And we're all like, yeah, but wait a minute, it's upside down. So was this staged possibly to make it look like, oh, this was an ISIS attack, we should all be very afraid? Is it possible that that jabber who did this attack was manufacturing for whatever reason that he was with ISIS? I mean, after all, he only made videos pledging his allegiance to ISIS in the wee moments before the attack. Yes, his family said that he had converted to Islam a while earlier, but that he had not, but just barely had converted to Islam from Christianity. He grew up a Christian, converts, and then puts the flag upside down on a pole and drives it into a crowd and is acting all erratic. Is it possible that he put that on the pole upside down because he really wasn't ISIS and he didn't know that the flag should be upside, that the way the flag should actually fly doesn't recognize the way that it should be attached to the pole? Is it possible that he had some sort of motivation in staging that he was ISIS? We've seen people throughout the Palestinian protests, for example, the pro-Palestine protests. We've seen people dressed up in keffiyehs doing Nazi salutes, or people putting swastikas on places only for it to come out that the person who did it was Jewish, and that they were attempting to sow fear, that they were trying to make things look worse, or they were trying to prove their narrative correct. And in fact, their narrative wasn't, but they were just trying to get people to take them seriously, or kind of make things seem graver than they really were. So is it possible that he was kind of one of those actors where he's not really ISIS, but he wants people to be afraid of ISIS for some reason? What would be his motivation for that? That's a possibility as well. But it is very bizarre that the flag for the ISIS flag that he was pledging allegiance to, was upside down on this pole. Upside down flag flying, by the way, could also express dissent for that entity. So it's a distress signal in some cultures, like here in the United States, the upside down flag, but it's also an act of resistance against the entity. It's also perceived as an act of defiance against that entity. So was he defying against ISIS by flying it upside down? I mean, there's a lot of unanswered questions here, but it's strange nonetheless that the ISIS flag was upside down. This guy also just happened to only make videos in the wee hours leading up to the attack, wee moments really leading up to this attack, saying that he was a member of ISIS. Wouldn't you have some other evidence that you were with ISIS prior to that point, rather than just sheer moments before an attack? Also, he was from Houston, but he just so happened to know that the road barriers were under repair in New Orleans. How would you know that? Do you know which roads are under repair in cities hours away from you? Would you know if you were staging an attack, let's say in New York, which roads just happen to not have barriers that were working? That doesn't seem really plausible, quite honestly, that he would know, a guy from Houston, Texas, who rented a car in Houston, Texas, and drove it to New Orleans. How would he know which roads just happen to not have their bollard system fixed at that moment? So we're also supposed to believe that a divorce and some financial troubles because of the divorce caused a middle-aged man, not inside of the norm of the profile of who joins ISIS. We're supposed to believe that this middle-aged man making six figures but going through a divorce, that the divorce was so traumatizing to him that he decided to get radicalized online or somewhere and be radicalized by ISIS. We're supposed to believe this. These are things that just don't really add up. Another thing that's really strange that I also want to point out is that in 2021, he had a real estate license because he was trying to start his real estate business. And the real estate license showed he used an alternate name. He often went by another name. So his actual name was Shamsud Din Jabbar. His alternate names, there were two others listed on that real estate license. One was Sham, so that's Shamsud for short. But another one was Eli. That was another name listed, and that's a little bit strange. Eli is not typically associated with Islam as a name. It's actually more associated with Judaism, or Christians will do Elijah or names like that. So that's a little bit weird that he would choose the name Eli for short. Where does that stem from? We don't know. Just wanted to point that out to you. So these are all of the inconsistencies relating to this attack. Now they're also telling us that more people were involved. And of course, this comes after they're trying to tell us that there's all of these potential Al-Qaeda cells in the United States. We're going to get to that here in a little bit. But let's go now to the Las Vegas. Actually, let's play this video. I want you to hear what this guy sounds like so you could hear this guy is American, not an immigrant from some other country. Watch this.
Good evening. I'm Shamsuddin Jabbar, property manager with Blue Metal Properties and team lead at the Midas Group at Core Realty. I just want to say hello and let you know a little bit about me. So I'm born and raised in Beaumont, Texas, and now live in Houston. And I've been here all my life, with the exception of traveling for the military, where I spent 10 years as a human resources specialist and IT specialist, where I learned the meaning of great service and what it means to be responsive and take everything seriously, dotting I's and crossing T's to make sure that things go off without a hitch. So I've taken those skills and applied them to my career as a real estate agent, where I feel like what really sets me apart from other agents is my ability to be able to, one, be a fierce negotiator. So not only do I brilliantly market your property to make sure it gets sold as quickly as possible or gets leased as quickly as possible, but I'm also going to take every ounce of energy and putting it into negotiating for you and for your property to get the best deal that you can possibly get for it. So once we get to the closing table, all the I's are going to be dotted, all the T's are going to be crossed, everything's going to go off without a hitch. And that is my word that I'm giving to you as your real estate agent. So if that's the type of agent you're looking for, reach out to me. You see my phone number on the page. If not, it's 832-774-9718. Give me a call. And even if you don't want to have me as your agent, call me with any questions you may have. So even if you're a first-time home buyer or you're an experienced real estate investor and you're just looking for somebody to help you with doing some analysis on some properties that you're looking at, either way, give me a call. I'm glad to help anytime, and I'm looking forward to talking to you.
Well, we won't be talking to him anytime soon because he's dead. All right. Also, let's move on now to the Las Vegas attack, and then we're going to kind of bridge these together. So also on January 1st, this one at 8 a.m. Local time in Las Vegas, a Tesla Cybertruck exploded outside of the Trump International Hotel in Las Vegas, resulting in actually, no, we know that the explosion itself did not result in the death of the driver, but there were injuries to 7 bystanders, and we know that the driver is dead, apparently from a gunshot wound. The explosion occurred 8 a.m. The Tesla Cybertruck was packed with firework mortars, gasoline canisters, and camp fuel containers. The blast was primarily contained within the vehicle, venting upward and outward without significantly damaging the hotel entrance. Elon Musk credits that to this attacker using a Cybertruck. If he used any other car, it would have kind of blown up. But because Cybertrucks are so, they're supposed to be like bulletproof cars, and he used a Cybertruck, the explosion contained inside of that truck primarily, which the guy who was found dead inside the truck would have known that. So we'll get to that. The driver was identified as Master Sergeant Matthew Allen Leibelsberger, an active duty U.S. Army Green Beret, 19 years active duty in the military, active duty Green Beret. This is the guy. He had rented the Cybertruck also on the Turo app and drove the Cybertruck from Colorado Springs to Las Vegas. So he was living in Colorado Springs, rented an on Turo app, drove it to Vegas. He was found dead from what they're claiming was a self-inflicted gunshot wound inside the vehicle. The FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force is involved in this. They're saying it was an act of terrorism. And the CEO of Tesla, Elon Musk, confirmed that the Cybertruck, it exploded because of the items in the truck, had nothing to do with the vehicle itself. The Cybertruck was rented. And let me see what else I hear what do I have here? Leibelsberger and Shamsuddin Jabbar both had connections to the same military base, formerly known as Fort Bragg. Now it's Fort Liberty in North Carolina. However, officials have stated there is no definitive link between the Las Vegas explosion and the New Orleans attack. Leibelsberger allegedly also supported Donald Trump. He was a Trump supporter. He also was allegedly a supporter of Elon Musk. He wasn't like rabidly into Trump or Elon Musk, but he was a solid, firm supporter of both of them. So it's strange that he would take a Tesla Cybertruck and blow it up in front of Trump's hotel. He was also a supporter of Ukraine and a supporter. He was even, that right there is a supporting Ukraine t-shirt that he's wearing. You can see also this guy is a white guy, not from the Middle East. He's from the United States, U.S. Army Green Beret. And he was also recruiting for Ukraine. This was somebody putting a posting up saying quick 30-day contract opportunity in Ukraine, $550 per day, lodging and travel provided. And he messaged on there saying, I've got a top 18D recently ETS'd who is looking for just this opportunity, and I sent him your way. So he's sending guys to go fight in Ukraine, and he clearly was a supporter of Ukraine based on that t-shirt. So he was actively supporting Ukraine. Also, what we know is that the truck sat for about 20 seconds outside of Trump International Hotel before it exploded. So let's look at Matthew Leibelsberger's, some of his work history. He's been in the military forever. He's a U.S. Army Green Beret. He had a distinguished military career that included multiple deployments. Here are the details regarding the deployments: Afghanistan. He was deployed twice to Afghanistan during his service. We don't know the specific dates, but they occurred during his time with the Green Berets. He also deployed to various other countries like Ukraine, which is kind of strange, right? Are we supposed to be there? Are we supposed to have Green Berets in Ukraine, guys? Tajikistan? Are we supposed to have people there? Georgia? Were we supposed to have guys in Georgia to fight Russia? Was that something we were doing? And the Congo, places I think none of us really thought U.S. troops were supposed to be, but apparently this Green Beret was. Those deployments reflect his extensive experience in international operations, particularly where U.S. military involvement was focused on counterterrorism and training allied forces. So that's what he was there doing, I guess, training soldiers to fight Russians and others. Leibelsberger enlisted in the Army in 2006. He joined the Green Berets about a year later as a communications specialist. He spent 18 of his 20-year military career, or 19 of his 20-year, or 18 of his 19 years, I believe, with the Special Forces. He did receive 2 Bronze Stars, including one awarded for valor in combat, along with other commendations such as Combat Infantry Badge and an Army Commendation Medal with Valor. Also, what's interesting about this history that he's got right here is, let's zoom in on that. Let's show this full screen. You can see that he was most recently a remote and autonomous systems manager. Remote and autonomous systems. Also, down below at the hyperspectral imaging, that company, he was a contractor, and he engineered and he focused on explosive devices, like finding explosives. It was explosive imaging. So he was familiar with explosives. He was familiar with autonomous systems, and he's got a Tesla Cybertruck that has an autonomous driving mechanism to it, and it's loaded with explosives. So this guy should have known both of those systems quite well. Now, the Vegas police found inside the car. They said, first and foremost, we found a military identification, which is what we showed you, the military identification badge. They also said, let's show that badge so people could see that. This was found inside of the car. And the car was allegedly, I mean, the body inside was so charred, they couldn't identify the body. But this is the badge that they were able to recover. They also said that they found his passport, a Desert Eagle 50 caliber semi-automatic pistol, an SLR Model B30 semi-automatic firearm, a number of fireworks, an iPhone, a smartwatch. Several credit cards were also in the name of the subject. He's from Colorado Springs, Colorado, born July 22nd, 1987. His body was burnt beyond recognition, and I do still not have confirmation 100% that this individual was inside our vehicle. So they still have not identified him. That is according to the Las Vegas Police Department. Okay, so let's get to some of the inconsistencies of this one. First of all, the driver's body was burnt beyond recognition, but the identification didn't burn up. You could find a passport, like the most fireproof thing on earth, apparently, is a passport and a military ID. So you just happened to find identification that told you who this guy was, but everything else in the car was totally charred, including him. And now you have to actually do like teeth. You have to use his teeth in order to figure out who this guy actually is. Also, why would he bring his passport on a drive from Colorado to Nevada? Do people typically travel with their passports, or do they use their driver's license and military ID, for example? So that doesn't seem suspicious at all. Why do we only see on the CCTV footage? We've only been given the truck blowing up, but we don't see any CCTV footage of the truck driving up to the hotel. We also don't even see footage of what would be the supposed self-inflicted gunshot wound. They're claiming that he was found with a gunshot wound, that he shot himself. He clearly must have shot himself mere moments before the explosion. Why don't we see any CCTV footage of any of that? Was it a self-driving Cybertruck? People are asking that question. So if he was found shot inside of the truck, is it possible that he was shot at a different location and the truck drove up to this location and then detonated? And how did it detonate? Is it detonating through a remote? If it's not on a timer and if it's on a remote, somebody else would have had to do that, not the dead guy inside who shot himself in the head. Unless I guess you could theorize that he hit the button, shot himself, and maybe the button had like 10 seconds. Like the full self-driving on Teslas, it's not supposed to allow you to be unconscious while you self-drive. It has these cameras in the cabin and detects your eyes to ensure that you're looking at the road, and you also have to be touching the steering wheel. So it looks for certain kinetic movements in order for it to know that you're still attentive, you're still alert. It doesn't really do full self-driving. But here's the thing. Let me show you this. This was from the Daily Mail. Hackers had discovered that there was a way to hack the cars into what they call Elon mode. And that Elon mode allowed full self-automated driving without all of those safety parameters that are currently in the full self-driving. And that you only needed a piece of equipment that was about $600-700, whatever the pound is to dollars here in the, but 520 pounds in order to buy this piece of equipment that would hack the vehicle and allow full self-driving. So you could automate it with a dead guy in the car. You could automate that car to drive up to the Trump hotel and have nobody in it because hackers had figured out how to do this. So that's a bit, something to keep in mind. This guy was in the autonomous, sector. He knew autonomous things. So did he know other people who, of course, he knew other people who were also involved in that same sort of research or area of expertise inside of the military? Did he know others? Was he put in the car? Is it really even him? Do we know? We don't know. We don't have any of these answers. Another thing, though, that I want to bring up was that this guy, this is from Cultural Husbandry on X, says, we have a major problem. Matthew Livelsberger, aka Matt Berg, changed his Signal safety number. So Signal's an app, like a communication app. He changed his Signal safety number just before the explosion, and then his photo and safety number changed after the explosion. How did a dead guy change, and look, these are the tweets that show the timestamps and showing that he had apparently changed his number and profile after the dead guy, after the guy was dead. He was able to do this. So that's a little bizarre. Doesn't really add up, right? So these are a lot of inconsistencies with these attacks that aren't really, they don't seem really clear cut. Now let's talk about Fort Bragg. Ryan Ruth, let's talk about Ryan Ruth. Because Ryan Ruth was the guy that tried to kill Trump the second time. This was like the ultra pro-Ukrainian guy who was hiding out at Trump golf course, looking to kill Trump. Now, he was heavily connected to Fort Bragg. And now we know also that when it comes to Matt Berger, we'll call him for short, Matt Berger, we don't know how much time he spent at Fort Bragg, but we know that he was a Green Beret, and that Green Berets primarily are stationed at Fort Bragg, that is the U.S. Army Special Forces base. But it's also the U.S. Army's hub for PSYOPs. This is for training PSYOPs, implementing PSYOPs, deploying PSYOPs. That is, Fort Bragg has become synonymous with PSYOPs. And it turns out that Ryan Ruth had been there many times before. Now, Ryan Ruth was never a member of the military, but strangely, he had served, he had never served officially in the military, but strangely, he had visited Fort Bragg a whopping 147 times, staying overnight on 29 occasions over the course of 4 years. Fort Bragg, home to the U.S. Army Psychological Operations Unit and Special Forces, and Ryan Ruth, who was not in the military, went 147 times and stayed the night 29 times. So this is not normal. That averages Ryan Ruth showing up to this base 3 times a month over 4 years with occasional overnight stays. I'd say numerous overnight stays over 4 years. If you stay somewhere 29 times, you're practically dating. Might as well get married. Fort Bragg, which is now known as Fort Liberty, they had to change the name because it's so synonymous with PSYOPs, and it got a bad rap. And they were like, oh, we better change the name of this base. It has a long and significant connection to PSYOPs in the U.S. Army. It was established in 1952. Their PSYOP wing inside of Fort Bragg was established in 1952. It continues to be the central hub for PSYOP training, development, and deployment, with PSYOP teams being sent worldwide from this location. The long-standing connection has made Fort Bragg synonymous with psychological operations in the U.S. Army, serving as a primary location for PSYOP training, unit headquarters, and operational planning. And Ryan Ruth showed up there 147 times, and we know that Matt Berg was a Green Beret and likely stationed. We don't know for sure if he was ever stationed there, but it is highly probable as a Green Beret, spending 18 years as a Green Beret. He spent plenty of time at Fort Bragg. And we also know that the initial attacker also at least spent his final time before he got a DWI at Fort Bragg. We don't know how much if he spent years there. We don't know how long the first attacker, Jabber, we don't know how long he spent at Fort Bragg, but we do know that he was there. So all 3 of them are connected to Fort Bragg, the headquarters for PSYOP training and deployment. Does that not seem strange to anybody else? Does that not seem strange to you? And all of them were essentially carrying out attacks that would continue the military-industrial complex. This last one, Matt Berg, it is unclear what the heck was going on there. It's even unclear if he was actually the one in the car, in the Cybertruck. We still don't know. But certainly Ryan Ruth, who was advocating for Ukraine, Trump is coming around saying he's going to pull out of Ukraine. Then you've got the supposed ISIS attacker who flew the flag upside down, didn't even know his own flag for his own allegiance. He didn't even know the right way to fly it. And that guy is, so now what does that do? Now we're seeing a lot of people going around saying, ISIS, we have to go and fight them. See, this is why Israel's doing our dirty work for us, don't you know? So now we got to keep supplying Israel. We got to keep helping Israel because they're the ones who are fighting ISIS terrorists, when actually Israel was caught helping, aiding, and abetting ISIS terrorists. That's what Israel was caught doing. They were caught. They denied it. when they were caught actually helping ISIS fighters and treating them and Al-Qaeda fighters. They denied it, but then the evidence became undeniable and they weren't allowed to deny it anymore. Oh, we didn't know who we were. We were just humanitarians helping people. We didn't, we were just, because Israelis are now suddenly super humanitarian and they like to help apparently radical Islamists, and that because out of humanitarian needs, if that's believable to you, considering everything that they've been doing. So people are screaming now, the aftermath of these two attacks. People are kind of overlooking the Vegas attack, and they're just saying, "Oh no, this is somebody who's against Donald Trump and against Elon Musk." What does that attack serve to do? That attack serves a couple of things. All of the attacks serve a couple of things. One, to boost the FBI and their importance here. You've got Kash Patel, who's been nominated to take over the FBI. He says he's going to gut the place. And now suddenly you've got these attacks and the FBI is relevant, and the FBI, well, you don't want to gut the FBI because they're stopping ISIS and they're stopping attacks on you, Donald Trump. So, I mean, look, this is against you and Elon Musk. You don't want to gut the FBI. No, you wouldn't want to do that because we're keeping you safe and we're keeping the American people safe from ISIS. So we see a lot of the FBI, boosting up of the FBI. And also, of course, this is going to harm the American people, causing us to continue living under Patriot Act-like measures that they keep imposing on us, ripping our civil liberties away. You've got, of course, groups of people screaming about Islam because of the attack in New Orleans, saying that this guy who didn't even know how to fly the flag, the ISIS flag, right, that, see, this is the issue here. It's those damn Muslims, the Muslim immigration. It's their fault. It's them. We got to do something. Here's a tweet. This is an Israeli supporter, Ayel Yacobi. He says, this is what he says: the same flag the New Orleans terrorists had can be seen at pro-Palestine rallies around the world. When they chanted globalize the Intifada for more than a year, this is what they mean. So now he's trying to equate Palestine, pro-Palestinian protesters with ISIS, which, by the way, Hamas and ISIS fight each other. They fight each other. But most people don't know that. They just equate all Muslims and all radical Islam to the same groups. They think it's Iran, even though Iran has done a ton to fight ISIS. They think it's Iran, and they think it's Palestine and Hamas, and they're all behind this. And then you've got Bill Ackman, one of the billionaires here in the United States. And he says to this tweet, let's put this one up there. He says, Ayel Yacobi also says, what we witnessed today in New Orleans is the daily occurrence in Israel. When people say that Israel is the first line of defense for the West, this is what they mean. And Bill Ackman wrote, totally true. We share a common enemy, is what Bill Ackman, the billionaire, says. So again, trying to get people to believe that Islam and Muslims, that these are the people that we have to worry about. And Israel is over there doing the dirty job for us, so we should continue to support them. But you see how the attack in New Orleans, that right there is meant to continue sowing hate for Muslims and to get Americans continue to be rallied up in funding wars in the Middle East. So it's directly for, we got to keep wars going in the Middle East. Then you've got the attack in Vegas at Trump Tower, and that is meant to say, look, we got to keep the FBI going. We're keeping you guys safe. And look at all these radicals. They've come to America, or they're here in America. They're amongst us. They're living amongst us. We got to keep you safe. So don't dismantle the security state. Don't dismantle the military-industrial complex. Don't stop funding Israel. Don't stop funding Ukraine. Don't stop funding all of these people. Keep the military-industrial complex going. Keep the FBI going, and keep the Patriot Act going. That's what these attacks, really, that's the purpose that they serve. And that is the big question that we should all be asking. The biggest question that we should all be asking is, who benefits the most? Who benefits the most from these attacks? Let me show you this clip. This is Sarah Adams. She was a former intelligence analyst and targeter with the CIA. Okay, so you could trust a CIA analyst. And she's sitting on the Sean Ryan show. This has gone viral now since the attack in New Orleans. Now, Sean Ryan is also a former Navy SEAL CIA contractor. So you got two CIA spooks right here. And they're going to try to tell you, they're trying to tell us that there's 1,000 Al-Qaeda sleepers in the US, Al-Qaeda and ISIS, which, by the way, they also fight with each other, but sometimes they converge. And Syria just got taken over by Al-Qaeda and ISIS. The leader of Syria now was ISIS, and then he became Al-Qaeda, or he was Al-Qaeda, and then he became ISIS. I don't know which order it went in. But now he's in charge of Syria, and we're championing the guy. So clearly the U.S. isn't really against these guys. So why would they attack us if we're for them? They only attack us when we need them to attack us so that we could keep the war morale going, because we need to keep that going, right? So there's 1,000 Al-Qaeda sleeper cells in the U.S. This is what she says. Watch this.
How many people, how many fighters do you think we can expect in each attack?
Well, the 1,000 is all of them. So we're calling it, it's an Al-Qaeda planned attack, but within those 1,000 terrorists, some of them are ISIS because they want ISIS to be blamed. I think the more of the fighter types are going to be ISIS, because then if they're caught, then they talk, I'm ISIS. I think more of the suicide bombers are going to be Al-Qaeda.
I think these attacks will happen simultaneously throughout the United States, or will they be one day here, next day here, another one over here next week?
So they want them coordinated. I don't know if coordinated means all at the same time, or if coordinated means we do it Monday, we do it Tuesday, we do it Wednesday, we do it Thursday, we do it Friday, just do 5 straight days. So, but they want it coordinated.
What kind of places do you think they're going to target?
So this is what's complicated. So Al-Qaeda's preference, as you can imagine, is symbols of the U.S. or anything that causes economic damage, right? So capital is a great symbol. I feel like bridges or any kind of public transportation always matters because it puts costs against us and it causes fear. But here's where it gets complicated. So remember, the terrorists might have their goal is they're going to attack the metro in DC, right? But remember, some of these terrorists are going to be ISIS. And remember, they can change location. So the ISIS guy might go down the metro and say, there's not many people down here. I'll kill 20, but there's a event going on. I'm going to go up there, right? And because ISIS is a little different. ISIS just wants mass casualty. In my opinion, terrorists in general just leaving Afghanistan, a lot of them are coming up through the Darien Gap to the border. And there was a big push, right? Get in the U.S. while you can. Now, not all those Al-Qaeda's attackers, right? But they came in with fake Afghan passports. They came in with fake Syrian passports, fake Turkish passports. Those are the kind of the 3 preferences because they're easiest to get. And then, if our Border Patrol agents, a lot of them haven't been overseas, right? If an Egyptian shows up at the border with a Syrian passport, is he going to know that person?
So there you go. Listen to the CIA spooks tell you. The CIA, by the way, who created ISIS and helped fund and create and train ISIS and Al-Qaeda, they're going to tell us now, we got a problem here in the United States and we got to keep working hard. And you need the CIA and you need the FBI and you need the military-industrial complex and we need to keep funding Israel and we need to keep funding Ukraine and we need to be spying on you Americans because look at you. Some of you are terrorists sleeping amongst us. And so we have to be doing all of these things, including ripping away your civil liberties. And all of this is necessary to keep you safe. That is ultimately what these attacks are doing. Now, is it possible that these attacks are legitimate, that there is some crazed ISIS running around? Even though ISIS has been heavily dismantled, they don't really have much power. They do some terrorist attacks here and there. These are awful, but this is used to sow fear into the public to get the public to agree to getting rid of their civil liberties. And a lot of things here are just not quite adding up. And a lot of things are looking really suspicious. And quite honestly, if we're going to look at a theme amongst all of these, it's clearly Fort Bragg and the military. So maybe we should be shutting down some military bases. Maybe that's the actual answer rather than, we got to ramp up the military industrial complex. Maybe we need to be ramping it down because clearly something's rotten inside of it, causing people to be radicalized. So maybe we should be looking at our own military rather than, we got to be fighting those Muslims in the Middle East. Nah, maybe we ought to be taking a look at our military industrial complex and all of the stuff that you guys do behind the scenes that we're not really totally privy to. All right, guys, let's move on with the show. If you're watching on YouTube, we are shutting it down now. The next topic is not safe for YouTube. Head to KimIversonShow.com. That is where you could get the full show without any further interruptions. We got a lot more to cover tonight. We will be right back. For those of you that are watching on Rumble, stick around. We're still here. Just give us a second. Bye to all of you on YouTube. Come over, watch us on Rumble, and get the full show. All right, let's talk about Tommy Robinson. He is trending right now. Tommy is one of the most polarizing figures in Britain. He's currently locked up in jail, with many calling him a political prisoner and advocating for his release, including Elon Musk, to others claiming he's a racist, Islamophobe, and he deserves to be silenced and punished. So who is Tommy? Well, Tommy is a working class guy. He's not a politician, not an academic, certainly not polished, but he's become a household name for millions, revered by his supporters as a fearless truth teller and condemned by his critics as a dangerous individual. Now, Robinson first gained attention as the founder of the English Defense League, the EDL, which is a grassroots movement that claimed to fight the spread of radical Islam in the UK. And under Robinson's leadership, the EDL staged protests and demonstrations that drew national headlines. One of his most controversial positions, or many of them, we're going to go over here. His claim is that the UK government and media were deliberately ignoring the rise of Islamic extremism to avoid accusations of racism. So this is something we've seen lobbed at many governments. But particular, Tommy Robinson has been lobbying this at the UK government for quite some time. Let's look at some of his most controversial statements that he has made. He's described Islam as a, quote, disease and a, quote, threat to our way of life. In 2016, he stated, quote, "I'm not far right. I'm just opposed to Islam. I believe it's backwards and fascist." He referred to the Prophet Muhammad as a pedophile. During an EDL speech in 2011, Robinson claimed that, quote, "every single Muslim in the UK had gotten away with the July 7th London bombings, effectively holding all Muslims collectively responsible for terrorist acts." Regarding immigration, he claimed, quote, "the current refugee crisis is nothing to do with refugees. It's a Muslim invasion of Europe." He called for a ban on Muslim immigration. Robinson stated that migrants entering Europe are harassing women, they're raping women, they're culturally and ideologically not going to assimilate. In January of 2016, he tweeted, quote, "I personally send every adult male Muslim that has come into the EU over the past 12 months back tomorrow if I could. Fake refugees." Following the 2017 Finsbury Park mosque attack, when a van drove into a crowd of Muslims, Robinson tweeted, quote, "the mosque where the attack happened tonight has a long history of creating terrorists and radical jihadists and promoting hate and segregation." He also wrote, "I'm not justifying it. I've said many times, if government or police don't sort these centers of hate, they will create monsters as seen tonight." On Good Morning Britain, he held up the Quran and described it as, quote, "violent and cursed." He co-authored a book titled Muhammad's Quran, Why Muslims Kill for Islam, which included the statement, "if you're a Muslim, please put this book down. We do not wish you to become a killer, because this book leads you to understand the doctrines and history of Islam more thoroughly." One issue that defined Robinson's career is grooming gangs, what they're calling, quote unquote, grooming gangs. He's repeatedly alleged that networks of predominantly Pakistani men sexually exploited young girls, while he says authorities turned a blind eye. So he didn't just talk about it. He also went onto the streets, filming outside of courthouses during really high-profile trials, asking uncomfortable questions. In one instance, he said, quote, "why does the media call these Asian gangs when the victims and witnesses all know what's really going on?" Because he's talking about them being from Pakistan. Pakistan is technically Asian. They say Indians and Pakistanis are Asian. It's a criticism that earned him, his criticism of these gangs, of these grooming gangs, have earned him both applause from his supporters and also condemnation. And it's the reason many see him as the champion of the voiceless inside of the UK. But Robinson's activism hasn't come without consequences. He's actually served many stints in jail for random things like assaulting a police officer, mortgage fraud, using someone else's passport to enter the US. Tommy has also faced jail and currently in jail for speech crimes, In 2018, he was jailed for contempt of court after live streaming outside a courthouse during a grooming gang trial. Tommy was sentenced to 13 months in prison for live streaming outside of that courthouse after he live streamed a video outside of Leeds Crown Court during an ongoing trial involving a sexual grooming gang. And this broadcast violated reporting restrictions that had been put in place to postpone the publication of any details until the end of the series of linked trials involving 29 defendants. And the video Robinson streamed lasted an hour and a half. It was viewed online 250,000 times after being also live streamed. It was live streamed on Facebook. The judges found that Robinson had encouraged others to, quote, harass a defendant by finding him, knocking on his door, following him, and watching him, which created, quote, a real risk that the course of justice would be seriously impeded. So they threw him in jail for 13 months. His supporters saw it as a blatant attempt to silence a critic of the establishment. Tommy did appeal that case and he won, so he wasn't forced to serve 13 months. He instead was released after serving just over 2 months in prison. But during his imprisonment, Robinson alleged that he was placed in solitary confinement, denied adequate nutrition, housed in facilities where he was constantly at risk. He described it as an attempt to break him, calling it politically motivated punishment. Here's a video, actually, of him after being held in solitary confinement for 9 weeks. Watch that now. Robinson is back in jail at Belmarsh, this time for contempt of court again, tied to a defamation case involving a Syrian refugee teenager, Jamal Hijani. Essentially what happened was after a video surfaced from 2018 showing the boy being taunted, choked, and pushed to the ground by other students at his school, Robinson falsely accused the Syrian boy of assaulting 3 girls, and the family took him to court for libel, and they won. Part of the lawsuit required Tommy to no longer repeat the false claim, and he even admitted that he was wrong. He said, I made a mistake, I was wrong. He admitted, but he also said he was persecuted for speech, and he shouldn't have been. So he recently released his documentary called Silenced, where he talks about the case, and though he recognizes he was wrong, he talks about being a hindrance on free speech, but because he talked about the case and that was against the court order, they said he directly went against court orders, and now he's serving 18 months in Belmarsh for contempt of court. His critics call it a long overdue reckoning for his disregard of the law, but supporters see it as yet another example of how the system punishes dissent. We actually have a clip from the documentary. This was just promoted by Elon Musk as a must-watch. Here's about a minute, the first minute of the documentary. Watch this.
The documentary you're about to watch is the most important documentary I've ever made. This story is far bigger than Tommy Robinson. This is about the weaponisation and the politicisation of these buildings. Court buildings across the West. The Royal Courts of Justice, ironically named. These buildings have been weaponised and used against members of the public to destroy them if they speak out. From Donald Trump to Steve Bannon, to Geert Wilders, to Marie Le Pen, to Katie Hopkins. That's what's happening. My job as a journalist, I stand for freedom of speech, I stand for freedom of the press. And I failed, because 3 years ago when I lost a court case in here, and they bankrupted me to the tune of £1.6 million, on a documentary, you're going to see the entire story was a lie, okay? I failed because I should have come out of court and I should have played you that film. Why didn't I play you that film? Because I was given a gagging order by this building, by this judge. I was silenced, and I allowed them to silence me. Because I was scared. I was scared of 2 years in prison. I was scared of the effect that solitary confinement for that length of time would have on me. I was scared of jihadi gangs in jail. And I was scared of the effect it would have on my family. I failed me and I failed you. I'm not going to fail myself again. You're now going to watch the best citizen journalism and the most incredible expose of the establishment you've ever seen.
Okay, so for releasing this film, which they told him, don't do it. If you do it, you're going to go back to jail. It's going to be bad. And he says he was afraid of solitary confinement. He was afraid of Muslims in the prison and what they would do to him potentially because he's a giant critic of Islam. He is now serving 18 months in Belmarsh. And what's interesting about this is for violating a civil offense, not even a criminal one. He's likely being held in solitary confinement, which they don't really have quite solitary confinement at Belmarsh, but pretty much it's similar. It's debilitating for people. We saw what it did to Tommy Robinson after only 9 weeks. We saw him breaking down in tears. And worse, we saw what it did to Julian Assange after years in Belmarsh. Also, while Tommy is in prison, he is being charged with a bogus, trumped-up charge under the Terrorism Act, which is the UK's version of the Patriot Act. He's going to be subject to questioning that he legally cannot refuse under the Act and to searches without warrants. This all sounds extreme and wrong, and a warning of what could happen here in the US. In fact, many people are pointing at Tommy and saying just that. But now let's talk about the hypocrisy. Because Elon Musk and many other pro-Israel, anti-Islam figures like Tommy are calling for the release of Tommy Robinson while also simultaneously calling for the silencing and punishment of anti-Zionist voices. Last week, X went on a tear and ripped the blue check marks and monetization away from several prominent accounts. These accounts have lost their verification status, reducing their visibility, cutting off their ability to earn from ad share revenue or subscription services. This crackdown began shortly after a group of MAGA activists criticized Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk's stances on H-1B visas. And among the most vocal critics was Laura Loomer, who was the first to lose her blue checkmark. Soon after, conservative OG lost their gold verification, which costs a lot of money. You have to pay, I think, $1,000 a month to have that on Twitter. And if you're an outlet, conservative OG lost their gold verification. Also, anybody that was associated with conservative OG lost their blue ticks from all of the accounts that were affiliated. But there was another group that was suspended shortly after, most likely for criticism of both Elon's H-1B stance and also for being anti-Zionist accounts. Myron Gaines from Fresh and Fit podcast lost his checkmark, lost his ability to monetize. Dr. Anastasia Lupus also lost hers. She's a Danish doctor. She's been a big vocal critic of Israel online. She lost hers. You could see 1.4 million followers. How many did Myron Gaines have? How many followers did he have? Let's take a look at that one again. He's got 206,000 followers. So these are bigger accounts. Lupus has a lot of followers, 1.4 million. She's been very, very vocal against Israel. Suleiman Ahmed also lost his check. He has 624,000 followers, lost his ability to monetize, lost his blue check. I believe he is Mario Nafal's co-host for some of his stuff, from what I understand. Stu Peters was another account that got his blue check ripped away, 762,000 followers. Jake Shields, also a big critic of Israel, 829,000 followers, lost his check mark, lost his ability to monetize. None of these accounts have been informed of the specific reasons behind their penalties. It's all subjective. Nick Fuentes, who many people point to as the godfather of the anti-Zionist rhetoric, and people are claiming that these accounts are associated with Nick Fuentes. They're groypers. That's what they call his followers. Nick Fuentes actually laid out on his show that things like this would happen. He is a big conservative, anti-immigration, America first. People label him an anti-Semite. Maybe he is. I haven't listened to him enough or paid much attention to know exactly what his stances are, but I know he's a big, giant critic of Israel. But he has not supported Donald Trump. And he's gotten a lot of flack from the conservative right about not falling in line and supporting Donald Trump. But his reasons he lays out, watch this.
It's all connected. And that's why now the Heritage Foundation is devising the blueprint for combating anti-Semitism when a willing administration enters the White House. And this is what they care about. That's why Palantir supports Trump. That's why all these Zionists support Trump. That's why they want to drag my name through the mud. They say, oh, you don't support Trump because you're a single issue voter and all you care about is Israel. No, I'm America first. And the reason we can't have American sovereignty is because the Israel lobby stands in the way. It's AIPAC, it's the Adelsons, it's the ADL, it's billionaires like Bill Ackman, it's their control over social media, it's their ownership of the media. It's that Sherry Redstone supported some Jewish Israeli journalist calling Ta-Nehisi Coates an anti-Semite on TV. I mean, would have been unthinkable years ago. So my single issue is American sovereignty, and as long as that's in the way, we don't have it. And it's not just that Trump isn't in favor of it, he's fighting against it. Because he will empower these pro-Israel nationalists to go after people like me for telling the truth. To go after and target people like me. And by the way, when my fans, when Groypers go and they interrogate Trump surrogates like Charlie Kirk and Vivek, and we say, hey, why should we support Trump? He's in favor of legal immigration and war with Iran, and he's pro-Israel. They say, well, the one thing he will provide is he will not allow censorship. But it looks like that's not true, because Chris Rufo, who's backed by some of the biggest conservatives, called for censorship against anti-Semites yesterday. He wrote in a magazine funded by Soros and Claremont and Peter Thiel that free speech on Twitter has gone too far, and anti-Semitic conspiracy theorists, the Groypers, gotta go. And then the same week, Heritage promulgates their new plan to create a public-private partnership to empower the Jewish interests to use the RICO statute, counterterrorism, and immigration laws to shut down free speech as it pertains to Israel's conflict in the Middle East.
Yeah, and that's exactly what is happening and going to happen as soon as Trump takes office and the administration changes. I think we're going to see a massive crackdown on anti-Israel or anti-Zionist speech and accounts. Pro-Palestine protests, I think, are going to be cracked down on. I think we're going to see a major crackdown on free speech. One thing, though, that Musk tweeted out, so this was sort of his defense of ripping away the blue checks and the monetization from all of these major accounts. And Nick Fuentes, by the way, was reinstated onto Twitter by Musk, but he has not been allowed to get his blue check or monetize his accounts or anything like that. But he's allowed on the platform, but that's it. So Musk says in defense, he says, free speech doesn't mean paid speech, which is interesting point. We'll talk about this a little bit more. My producer, Ben, laid it out, quote, so Elon hates Fuentes, but will go to bat for Tommy Robinson. They have basically the same ideology except one thing. Ben, what is that one thing, you think?
Israel. It's Zionism.
Israel. Zionism.
I mean, what else would you expect? I mean, Tommy Robinson, as we showed earlier, he has photos of him in a Mossad t-shirt on an Israeli Merkava tank in the Golan Heights, wearing IDF shirts. There's rumors and some screenshots that I haven't been able to confirm, but saying he got funding from various Zionist affiliated NGOs. In the meantime, Nick Fuentes is, he takes it a bit further than I would, but he is vehemently anti-Israel. He is vehemently anti-Zionist.
I think he might even be anti-Jew. Don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely.
I haven't, like I said, I haven't really studied him or followed him a whole lot, but there are maybe some, and I'm not really 100% certain, like what is considered anti-Jew, right? Like when are you anti-Semitic? At what point does it cross into that? And I don't know if I've heard him say anything specific, but he's certainly critical of not just Zionism in Israel, but I think he's critical of the religion, the beliefs, the culture. I think he's critical, which personally, I kind of feel like that's fair enough to be critical of. You could say whatever you want about those weird Scientologists, right? You're allowed to do that. Or the weird Mormons. Like, if you're allowed to criticize certain religions, why are you not allowed to criticize all the religions, right? But there is sort of this, where we're not allowed to, look at what Tommy Robinson, completely criticizes Islam. Totally on television. He'll hold up the Quran and say, this is terrible stuff. We can't be following this stuff. And I don't know if Nick is saying anything really different than that about Judaism or Jewish culture or the tribal sort of mentality that everybody gets within their groups. Everybody's tribal. So I don't know.
That's true. Everyone is tribal.
Everybody's tribal.
That being said,
women are tribal. We have women's days. We get together. We do women's things. Men are not allowed, kind of a thing. So
men are tribal too, to be fair. But with Nick, I've seen videos of him, praising Hitler and that kind of thing. And so for me, that where I draw the distinction between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, for me, is actually the difference. If you can draw a distinction between Judaism and Zionism, and of course, to me, that means a lot of Zionist Jews are actually anti-Semites themselves. I see Nick as somebody who just is a useful idiot. Really, he sort of exacerbates the anti-Semitism and
Yeah.
convinces Jews, and helps it to go to Israel. Helps Israel convince Jews to go to Israel and say, "Look, you're not safe here." He would rather see all American Jews go to Israel, whereas a traditional
Okay, I
anti-Zionist,
see.
I would say,
Wants to
would
see the
have
dismantling
other
of Israel.
ideas. That's what I want to see. So
Interesting. That's what I think. I had this pointed out to me the other day, that is the difference between the anti-Zionists on the right and the anti-Zionists on the left, is that the anti-Zionists on the right would like to see Jews leave the country and go to Israel. Although I will say, I mean, I understand that sentiment if it's like, if you are an Israel first person, right? If you're Israel first, then what are you doing here? For one, why aren't you over there? I mean, if that's your homeland, if you think that's your homeland, if you think that's where you belong, if that's the place that you're really going to pledge your allegiance to, then why aren't you there? And I think that's a fair, I don't know if that's like anti-Semitic to the point where it's, okay, I just want Jews to leave because I don't like Jews. I mean, that would be one thing to say, but it's another thing to say, look, if you don't have an allegiance to this country, we don't want you here trying to, well, or you could, and which is fine. I actually think you could be, there's plenty of people who I think love their homeland more than they love America and they wish they could go back or whatever, but they're not influencing our government. They're not billionaires influencing the discourse online.
like Brian
Right? And
Mast.
that's where it becomes different.
Yeah.
Right.
I think a lot of people would say somebody like Brian Mast. And I mean, there are some things that I agree with Fuentes on, like Brian Mast. I think we'd both probably agree that he's a traitor to his country and that he should probably be tried for treason. I think you would likely agree with that as well.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think that he's America first. And there's a lot of people out there like Ben Shapiro, for example, that I think if the United States and Israel went to war with one another, and this is where it boils down to. If the two nations went to war, which side would he fight for? And I think he would fight for Israel. I think he would spy on America for Israel, or he would go to Israel and advocate for Israel's win. I think he would advocate for America to lose if there was a war between the two. And that's where that distinction is. Like, look, my family comes from Vietnam. The United States and Vietnam did have a war. My family actually still wanted the U.S. to win, but nonetheless, because that's why they're here, right? But if the U.S. went to war with Vietnam now, I mean, I absolutely would not be cheering on Vietnam to win. I would want I do have family still there, so I want everybody to be safe. I'd want the war to end, but I'm also an anti-war person, right? I don't like wars in general, but I certainly would be advocating for the United States, the safety of the United States over any other country on earth. My allegiance is to the United States. That's most Americans, regardless of their heritage, whether they be Irish American or English Americans or whatever they are, right? Vietnamese or China, wherever they're coming from. Most Americans are pro-America, but the Israel is a different one, and I think it has to do with a lot of the teachings. I mean, were you taught any of this stuff when you were young? Were you taught like Israel's your homeland?
I have to say the Hebrew school indoctrination didn't really take on me, but you do sing the national anthem in Hebrew school.
Really, you do? What?
Yeah, yes, you
seriously?
do. Yeah, and I mean, I was young. I flunked out. But I do remember a degree of Zionist indoctrination. Yeah,
okay, so it is happening. It's happening to the youth. They're being told, like Jewish kids are being told, Israel's your homeland. This is
sure,
where
it's
you
a
really,
big problem.
Yeah,
because that's when the indoctrination starts. And I mean, I've talked to you about this before, Kim, right? Like progressive American Jews, a lot of American Jews, young Jews are progressive, and they're taught like never again, never again. And they're taught that by their families. And then that includes everybody. That includes Palestinians, but young American Jews aren't told about Palestinians in Hebrew school. They're told that, it's this empty land, and it's ours for the taking. This is where we're from. This is where we've always been, which is, of
Yeah.
course, not really the truth. It's far more complicated than that. But that, is at odds with the indoctrination that happens in Hebrew school, which I think is why you're seeing a lot of young American Jews. I mean, I don't know if I'm young anymore, but more and more of us are beginning to question Israel.
And that's so interesting because a lot of us, we're told to be proud of our culture and heritage, right? There's that, and I see, I'm just kind of having this side thought, a totally off side thought, but I just want to kind of put this together. There is something very profound about being taught the pride in your culture. There's something very, I think, important about it. I think it's really healthy for self-esteem, for a person's self-worth and value, to be taught to be proud of their heritage, their culture, their religion, like whatever it is, right? People are even proud, they're taught from a young age to be proud of their political ideologies of their parents, right? Like, this is what we're Republicans, so this is why we're happy, we're proud. And kids are taught this. And I think there's something really healthy there. I think and this is where I'm getting like way off on the thinking, but it shows how important this is. Black Americans have lacked this because they don't know where they come from. There's like this, they were ripped away from Africa, brought over here as slaves. They don't know which part of Africa they came from, which culture they stem from. And they're the one group that I can look at that just lacks this proud feeling of heritage and culture that everybody else gets. And I think it's been demoralizing, and I think it causes a lot of problems. I think there's a lot of self-esteem issues that happen there. I think it's very deeply psychological, like what happens with, when kids don't have their dads around. I think we see a real profound impact of what happens there to no matter their race or gender. If your dad's not around, a lot of the women often end up in bad relationships. The men often have no idea how to be a man or what does it mean, and they kind of go off to the wayside. I mean, there's like a psychological issue there. So we know that this is highly impactful. And then you've got the Jewish youth, and they're getting that cultural pride plus, right? So it's like the opposite of what's happening in the African American community, where they're not taught any of the culture because they don't know it. They don't know, which is such a shame. And then you got the Jewish kids, and they're taught something totally different than what most of us are taught, which is pride in our culture, happiness for, we're not sitting there thinking we're going to go back and move there. I mean, I've never once thought I'm going to go move to Vietnam and go integrate back in or anything like that. But
maybe some of us should go back to Eastern Europe.
No, but I just think that there's like this. But the difference is with the Jewish youth is being told not only being taught pride in the culture, but then being taught where you are isn't where you belong. That you now belong. It goes like the extra on top, and it creates this, I think, other extreme where the vast majority of us are like here, and then you've got Black Americans here, and then Jewish Americans here, where it's almost hyper pride, and it's to the point where it becomes hyper like supremacy, right? Where it can become a supreme ideology in that not just, and I don't mean just racial, I mean like the feeling of my country is somewhere else and it's better than you, and this is where we belong, and we're superior over in our country. So we're just here temporarily, and then we're going back to our country. And that is just not healthy for building this country. Both, I think, issues have created a deep psychological wound in this nation that needs to be reconciled in some way and understood in some way, that deep psychological, and it's got to be dismantled. I mean, both of them need to be dismantled. We need to somehow infuse pride in the Black community of their heritage that the rest of us get that they didn't get. And I've talked about this for years. I know it's like highly nuanced and people may or may not understand that. But then we have to dismantle also this thinking within the Jewish community of you don't belong here, you belong somewhere else, and that's your real homeland. And that's causing a shit ton of problems here and over in the Middle East.
Yeah, in regards to Jewish culture, I mean, I can speak to that a little bit in terms of, where we draw on our identity from. Right now, a lot of Jews draw their identity from Israel, right? This is cultural homeland, I suppose. And that is sort of enabled by the narrative that Jews have been victims, as opposed to a group of people who were at one point oppressed and are no longer oppressed, and as opposed to people who just walked into the slaughter rooms instead of people who actually fought back. If we were taught about people like Mark Edelman, who I've named my dog after, who was an anti-Zionist leader of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, did not recognize Israel. If we were taught about that in school, we might start to draw our identity upon anti-Zionism, upon the idea of resistance, instead of on the idea of victimhood and needing a safe haven. So I think what you said is completely correct.
And interesting, I think both groups have victimhood, right? Which, whether it be right or not, which I think, it's right to say we got captured and brought over here and we were enslaved, and that's like a really shitty past. And obviously
That's
Jews can point to a really right, and Jews can also point to a really shitty past, right? And so both of those groups, but they've gone in opposite directions as far as the background and the histories. And they tried to push it, amongst Black Americans, right? Was it Liberia that they tried to create? And they're like, let's send you back to Liberia and then you can go back where you came from, which is like not, it's like, hello, huge continent. Try sending me as an Asian, as a Vietnamese Asian, try sending me back to like India. Like that doesn't, that's just because it's in Asia, doesn't work
really
like
jive.
that. Totally different places, right? But back to this, the Tommy Robinson and the Nick Fuentes thing. I mean, Tommy, the stuff that I listed off that he said some really extreme stuff. And that is really not any different than any of these accounts that have been, ripped of their blue check and ripped of their ability to monetize. And what we all know too, when Elon says, well, free speech doesn't mean paid speech. Okay, fine. Except platforms we know boost accounts that make money because the platform makes money when the account makes money. So if they've demonetized an account, they're also, oftentimes the platform is also heavily demonetized. They're not able to collect subscription money. They get a percentage off of that or certain ad revenue. So they don't incentivize, they have no incentive to allow those accounts to grow or be amplified. So we know it's like a shadow banning. And not only that, but shouldn't the people, if Elon is all about the people, then shouldn't the people decide which content and which creators they want to support? And if they want to support somebody like Myron Gaines and Fresh and Fit, or if they want to support somebody like the Dr. Lupus, then is that her name? Yeah. Then
Anastasia Lupus.
People should be allowed to decide where they want to put their money. But I understand the fear, just like I understand the fear that got us into the Patriot Act. I understand the fear. I'm not disregarding the fear being that, if one person says really hateful things, the other people around them might not feel those hateful things, but they might start to feel those hateful things if they're pointed in the direction of hate, right? Like, oh, I wasn't even thinking about that, but now that you said something, then, oh, maybe, all right, yeah, you're right. I hate them. I don't like them either. I don't want them here. And that kind of creates this mob mentality. And we see what happens, the danger of mob mentality. I mean, people have their lives literally taken during mob mentality. I mean, that's like lynchings of the past, right? People, vigilante justice, like people get together, they start to get angry together. And then you hear about like gang raping of women. And it's like, how could 10 guys all together be rapists? Like rape should be one of those things that only happens rarely. Only certain people have this mentality, but somehow it just manifests in a group. So I understand the fear of group mentality and where group mentality can lead and how it can lead people who otherwise would not be violent or hateful to turn violent or hateful. But that's just like saying, okay, well, we have to have the Patriot Act and we all have to start removing our shoes and doing all this stuff and be surveilled and spied on by our government because some amongst us are terrorists. And it's like, yeah, that might be true. But, and I understand the fear and I understand where people would say, yeah, surveil them all. Look at everybody. Look at everybody's activity online. Look at all their phone records. We need to find the terrorists. I understand the fear behind that, but it doesn't justify the response to that fear. And there's just got to be a better way to manage that fear. So I don't, I understand that there is a growing fear of Islam in Europe. We've just said here on this show that Muhammad is now the number one boy's name in the UK. That is astonishing. I think a lot of people are very concerned about that. And probably right. That just goes to show that there's been a lot of immigration into the UK. And so I understand that the sentiment and that it needs to lead to a correction. I understand that people are getting angry about it. And so then they're saying really hateful things, but I just don't think censoring, I don't know that, I don't think censoring's the answer, but I'm also worried, and I understand the fear, because I also worry that we would end up like turning into Nazi Germany type thing, where it's like, how did these people how did they support that? How did they, or Israel and their thinking, and how they're like, yeah, just get rid of all the Palestinians. Like, how do you get to that point? What allows that to foment? You know what I mean? And get you to the
What's
point
that
where
famous
your whole
poem?
society is genocidal.
Yeah, the famous poem where like first they came for like the socialists and I didn't say anything, and then
Yeah.
it goes on and goes on. It's a slippery slope. Censorship is a slippery slope, and it might have started with these guys. Actually, I mean, they've been demonetizing people, large accounts even, for a while now, but this was like the really big one. This was like a bomb that dropped, and I mean, it starts somewhere, and then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
Always. It started with Milo Yiannopoulos. I remember when it started with Milo Yiannopoulos with YouTube, and then it became other people, and then other people, and then it grew and grew and grew, and now all of us. Now none of us can actually really monetize or be on YouTube, for example, because they just censor everybody and everything. And it started with Milo, and people cheered that on, and they said, yeah, I agree, he's an extremist. And so people are looking at Nick Fuentes and they're like, well, I agree, he's like totally an anti-Semite or whatever, and so it's fine. Or to go after Jake Shields or whoever, right? But this is what I don't understand. I don't understand the Jewish community in particular, with the history of the Jewish community. I'm really like, my brain is scrambled on this one. I do not understand how a group that actively says we have to have this homeland and you have to help us build this homeland because we're not potentially safe with you people, because you people could turn on us at any minute, right? So that's one narrative, that the building of Israel is because we might turn on you at any minute, right? So you have to have this other place where you're safe, the safest place in the world, because we might turn on you. That's the thinking. That's been the selling point. So then you've got these same group of people like Bill Ackman, who then goes and says, see, it's the Muslims. We got to get rid of the Muslims. We have to start, almost calling for mass expulsion of Muslims in a way, right? Saying deport all of these illegals, stop importing in all of these Middle Easterners. They don't belong here. They're toxic to our culture, like what Tommy Robinson says. And they're calling for this group of people to be expelled or limited or whatever it is. And it's like, how as a Jewish person are you not like connecting these dots and realizing you might be next? That people are literally starting to feel like, hey, you know what? You kind of prioritize Israel over our country, because guess what? A lot do. And then what do you think the next step is going to be after we get rid of the Muslim problem we've got? What do you think the next step is going to be? It's going to be, we got to get rid of the Jewish problem we've got, because they're also ones that are prioritizing values that are not our values, because the values are for a different country. It's not about just the value itself. It's about the fact you don't value this country, you value this other country. So how is it that they're sitting? I just don't understand how they, like, that's like the very people. I remember one of them, it was in the progressive left, Jordan Sheraton. He was one from Status Quo who was totally for the censoring and silencing of all of us on the left that he didn't view as real progressives. He thought we were radical progressives or whatever. And totally cheered on our censorship until it happened to him. And then suddenly, and I remember he came out and he was like, oops, my bad. I shouldn't have been championing this. I really didn't think it would come and affect me. And it was like, what did you think was going to happen? Like, this is what happens. So I don't understand all of these Jewish people advocating for getting rid of all these Muslims and trying to
You know what it is, Kim?
Discourse, like
it's identity
discord.
politics.
Oh, but it's so stupid. It's short-sighted.
Zionism,
it's like,
It is, of course, but Zionism is identity politics. They don't actually draw their identity. They draw their identity upon the sort of image of their identity. They don't draw it upon the historical roots of their people, which is, of course, expulsion and in some cases extermination. If they did, they'd probably be a little more cognizant that, they might be next.
Well, history repeats itself, and it's like, so I don't understand. I don't understand why anybody would call for we got to get rid of this one particular group, because it's not just, oh, the Jews should be worried because they might be next. It's like all of us should be worried. Any of us could be next. I mean, I don't know what the group is next that they'll target. I mean, that's the issue with censorship, is you don't know what idea suddenly tomorrow they're going to say is a dangerous idea, and that these people have dangerous ideology. I mean, what we've seen with censorship online has been, it started off with the, Milo Yiannopoulos thinking, and then it kind of went to those who didn't want to take the COVID vaccine. And, I mean, it's just any
even
of
back
these,
to RT. I mean, that's when
right.
A lot of the censorship started.
Right. So that's one thing I'm not really understanding about the thinking there, is the lack of foresight into, hello, this, you could literally be next. And if there is one group that I think should be worried, I think it would be, well, besides obviously Latin Americans are obviously worried, right? Muslim Americans are obviously worried. And I'd also be worried if I were Jewish American. I'd be worried about, there is a growing rise of people getting very upset about support for Israel, and they're not going to take it for much longer. And they're going to rise up, and there might be, history might repeat itself. I mean, it's just beyond me. I don't know. Anyway, thank you, Ben, for your insight on that and for your tweet. I think you got a lot of shit on that tweet. I noticed there were a lot of people that came
not to read the comments these days.
Oh, it's probably best.
Although I did see Myron Gaines actually agreed with me, which I was somewhat surprised to see.
Yeah, but you did have a lot of people that were like, no, that's not the same, or something weird. I don't know. But anyway, all right, guys, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next topic tonight. Thomas Massie, speaking of Israel and support for Israel, and the people in the United States realizing, wait a minute, maybe our country is completely bought off by Zionists. Thomas Massie exposed a bill, part of the bill. This is the U.S. House of Representatives House Rules Package. And Thomas Massie has pointed out that they snuck in a little provision to protect Netanyahu. And this would be the very first bill the House votes on right after they vote on who is Speaker of the House. So the very first item agenda for the U.S. House of Representatives, baked into that is the House Rules Package. And baked into that is this little caveat, carve out for Netanyahu. Now, just one of the things that I want you to understand about this House Rules Package is it is a set of, what it is, after they vote on Speaker, the House Rules Package is the set of regulations adopted at the beginning of each Congress to govern its procedures and operations. These rules dictate how legislation is introduced, debated, voted upon, and they establish the framework for committee structures and other legislative processes. So some changes that they're making, that they've proposed in the House Rules Package, which will be voted on tomorrow, I believe, depending on how the House, the Speaker of the House vote goes. One of the things that they're going to do is they're going to make it tougher to swap out the Speaker. So they didn't like what happened with Kevin McCarthy and with Mike Johnson. And so they're doing the threshold for initiating a motion to vacate the Speaker's position has been increased, and they're going to vote on that. So previously, any single member could force a vote to remove the Speaker. Under the new rules, at least 9 GOP members must support a motion to bring it to the floor. They're also adding in that committees are now permitted to adopt new rules on electronic voting. So if you can't be there in person, you want to vote remotely. And this is just reflecting the modernization of legislative procedures. But the sneaky little thing that they added in there was this little tidbit at the end that Thomas Massie pointed out. And it is this bill which is HR, they don't have the number on it yet, to impose sanctions with respect to the International Criminal Court engaged in any effort to investigate, arrest, detain, or prosecute any protected person of the United States and its allies. And this is specifically baked in there to protect Netanyahu, what the House is saying is that they will impose sanctions now on the ICC now that they have issued an arrest warrant for their buddy and pal and favorite person who they gave a record number of standing ovations to, Netanyahu. So Thomas Massie points this out, and he says, by the way, Thomas is not defending the International Criminal Court. He says the United States is a sovereign country, so I don't assign any credibility to decisions of the International Criminal Court. But how did a bill to protect Netanyahu make it into the House rules package to be voted on immediately after the speaker vote? Where are our priorities? Good question. And the priorities in this country are, of course, Israel first. That's what we're learning has happened to our government. It wasn't always this way, but somehow that money infiltrated in. America is for sale. And that is the first thing that I think every American should understand. This is not exclusive to Israel. This is not exclusive to the military industrial complex or big pharma or health insurance companies or any of that. This is an issue of America is for sale to the highest bidder. And all of these other groups, these special interest groups, no matter their special interests, have figured that out. And they use it against us. And they know that they'll just play the long game and they'll kind of buy us and buy us. And by the way, China's already doing this. So everybody should be understanding that China will rise up and replace Israel as the new overlords, because they will be ensuring that their special interest groups fund our government, buy off our government. They've already figured that out. And look, they're just beating us at our own game. It's not China's fault. It's not Israel's fault. It's not the military industrial complex's fault that our system is set up for it to be for sale to the highest bidder, but that's how America set itself up. And we should be hyper aware of this rather than focusing on one entity, which it is important to focus on the entities because that's how we understand the entire complex problem. But we have to understand that this is, once we get rid of, let's say, Israel's influence and we start pressuring politicians to stop taking AIPAC money and Bill Ackman money and Adelson money or whatever it is, we get them to stop taking that money. That's not going far enough. There's just going to be a power vacuum, and someone else is going to get in there and fill it up. And so that's what we're seeing right now, at least, is a good showcasing. I think when it was American industries like military industrial complex or big pharma, it wasn't as noticeable because at least they were American companies and they were employing Americans. And, it was somewhat beneficial to America. But the Israel thing is explicitly for a foreign country. China will be as well, or at least China will work their way in to buy off our government to ensure pro-China policies. And we're already seeing that. So this is a real thing. And I think Thomas Massie is right in pointing that out. He's still one of the most principled members, if not the most principled member of the House of Representatives. I sure wish he was Speaker of the House, but they will, of course, never do that. They'll never do that. They don't like truth tellers like Thomas Massie, that's for sure. All right, I want to give you guys some really great info that I came across on Twitter. And this is such important information. So I want to end the night with, what do you do if you're denied by health insurance? So millions of Americans, practically all of us, have health insurance. What we've learned about the United Healthcare CEO assassination and the aftermath of that is that United Health was denying 30% of the claims. These are people that were paying for a service. They expected to receive a service, and 1/3 of the time they were denied from getting that service that they paid for. That has really shined a light on the health insurance industry and their practices. Now, the health insurance companies do not control whether or not you get treatment. They control whether or not the treatment is paid for. So the alternative for people is they could get the treatment, but they will go bankrupt, or they will opt not to get the treatment that could potentially be life-saving. And that is a huge problem. So if you're denied health insurance, let me just go ahead and read this first tweet. This was a tweet that came out from Eternal Colonel, posted this. And he says, I used to run on-site corp medical clinics, and I taught my clinicians something I learned from a very savvy CNP. Always ask the name of the medical professional from the insurance company who decided the denial. See, it's supposed to be a physician who makes the decision, but it almost never is. So when you ask them to name that specific doctor, it causes a little internal panic. My experience is that The denial gets reversed within 24 hours of that question. I've never had it not work going back to 2007. Best of luck. So this woman, Lori, posted an image that backs this up, that kind of gives a little bit more detail of how this works and why. So your doctor ordered a test or treatment and your insurance company denied it. That is a typical cost-saving method. Okay, here's what you do. 1, call the insurance company and tell them you want to speak to the HIPAA compliance privacy officer. By federal law, they have to have one. 2, then ask them for the names as well as credentials of every person accessing your record to make that decision of denial. By law, you have the right to that information. So an insurance company, when they deny you a claim, a medical doctor in that specialty is supposed to be reviewing it to determine whether or not it is medically necessary. And but what these people are saying is that most of the time they just have some admin person who just looks at it and says denied, and they have no medical experience whatsoever. They're not qualified to say yes or no to these medical decisions. And then when you go to the insurance company and you press them on that and you say, hey, listen, I want to talk to the HIPAA compliance person because that they have to keep your records private. So you talk to that private person, and by law, they have to tell you who it was that reviewed your record to tell you you were not medically, that your treatment was not medically necessary for them to cover. So you can ask them, we want the names of these doctors and the credentials of these doctors. So did you have just some like random plastic surgeon review my file for my heart complication? Or did you have an actual cardiologist review it? Or did you just have some admin assistant who's been trained to deny, or was it AI? Or did you use AI? Who was it that accessed my record and made the decision of denial? By law, you have the right to that information. They will most always reverse the decision very shortly after, then admit that the committee is made up of low-paid high school graduates looking at criteria words, making the medical decision to deny your care, or AI to deny your care. Even in the rare case it is made by a medical professional, it is unlikely that it is made by a board-certified doctor in that specialty, and they do not want you to know this. So any refusal should be reported to the U.S. Office of Civil Rights as a HIPAA violation. So that is a hack. If you have been denied, this is, I think, absolutely essential information. Wanted to share it with you guys. I would love to hear from you if you've tried this and if it worked. If it did, email me, kim@kimiversen.com. Want to hear from you for sure. Does this hack work? All right, guys, that is it for tonight's show. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you for watching. We will be back tomorrow with another great show, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. See you then, guys. Good night.